I never believed in ghosts. I was always a logical person, pragmatic, rooted in reality. Even as a child, I dismissed all the spooky stories my friends would tell about haunted houses or eerie figures lurking in the shadows. When I moved into my new home, a century-old house with creaky floors, worn wooden beams, and an unsettling history, I thought little of the rumors that came with it. I saw them for what they were, idle gossip. But from the first night I spent there, things felt off. The house had its quirks, sure. The floorboards creaked loudly when I walked, and the windows rattled with the wind. But it wasn't those things that bothered me. It was the quiet, almost imperceptible noises, the ones you could dismiss if you weren't paying attention. Sometimes I would hear faint scratching sounds beneath the floor, as though something or someone was moving around in the dark. I remember the first time it happened. I was sitting in the living room, a book in my lap, when I heard a soft scratching noise. At first, I assumed it was the wind or perhaps a rat or squirrel in the walls. I didn't think much of it, but as I sat there, reading, the sound grew louder, more persistent, like something was clawing at the wood beneath my feet. My pulse quickened as I set my book aside and stood up. I knelt beside the wooden floorboards and pressed my ear to the ground, my breath shallow. The scratching seemed to grow more frantic, like it was trying to break through. I glanced nervously around the room, but there was no one there. No one except me. It was then that I heard it. A voice. Faint, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. The voice called my name, softly at first, but then more urgently. Sarah. I recoiled in shock. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I quickly stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what had just happened. It had to be the house settling, I told myself. The wood was old, and the sounds of a century-old structure weren't always easy to decipher. It was nothing, but deep down I knew it wasn't. As the days passed, the voices came more frequently. I began to hear them during the day when I was alone in the house. The whispering became more distinct, more insistent. Sometimes I could hear a faint knocking or tapping beneath the floorboards, like someone was trying to get my attention. And always, there was that voice calling my name in the dead of night. Each time it happened, it was harder to dismiss it as nothing more than the house settling. I began to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the sound of the voice echoing in my ears. The scratching noise never stopped, always coming from beneath the floor, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I did my best to ignore it. I told myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then came the night when I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was late, well past midnight, when the scratching began again. This time, though, it was louder, more frantic. It sounded like something was trying to escape. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread settle in my chest. I tried to ignore it, but the noise grew unbearable, the scratching turning into a dull thumping, like something heavy was being dragged beneath the floorboards. And then I heard the voice again, closer this time, as though it was right behind me. Sarah. My breath caught in my throat. The voice was no longer just a whisper. It was a low, guttural tone, full of malice and desperation. My heart pounded in my ears as I stumbled back from the floorboards, eyes wide with terror. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where the voice was coming from or what it wanted. All I knew was that it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. Without thinking, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way down to the basement. The air was thick and musty, the darkness oppressive. I stepped carefully, my footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. The light from my flashlight flickered as I descended the stairs, casting long shadows across the walls. When I reached the basement floor, I stopped. The air felt colder here, unnaturally cold. My breath misted in front of me as I scanned the room with my flashlight. The shadows seemed to shift, but I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I walked further into the basement, my eyes darting around. There, near the far wall, was an old wooden chest. The top was slightly ajar, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in years. As I approached, I heard it again, the faint scratching from beneath the floorboards, but this time it was louder, closer. And then a soft voice, a whisper, not from the chest, but from directly behind me. "Sarah, please." I froze. My entire body went cold. I didn't dare turn around, but I knew something was there. I could feel it, something unseen, but powerful, just beyond my reach. With trembling hands, I opened the chest. Inside, I found nothing but a single, tattered old diary. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the fragile paper. As I lifted it out, the air around me grew colder, the scratching noise louder. The basement door slammed shut behind me, locking me in. I turned to look back at the chest, my pulse racing. And there, standing at the edge of my vision, was a figure, a shadowy figure, barely visible in the dim light. I couldn't make out its features, but I could feel its eyes on me, burning into me. I opened the diary. The first entry was dated over a century ago, written by a woman named Margaret, who had once lived in the house. Her writing was frantic, full of desperation, describing strange noises beneath the floorboards, voices that called her name in the dead of night. And as I read, the words became more frantic, more desperate, until she wrote one final line, almost as a plea. "It's here. It watches. It won't stop." The air around me grew thick, suffocating. I dropped the diary, the pages fluttering as they landed on the cold floor. The voices grew louder, the scratching louder, and then I heard it, a loud bang, followed by the unmistakable sound of a child's laugh, echoing from beneath the floor. I turned to run, but the shadows moved with me, blocking my path. The basement door opened slowly on its own, as though beckoning me to escape, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, like I was suffocating, drowning in it. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me whole was the sound of the floorboards creaking, followed by a whisper, so close I could feel it against my skin. "Welcome home, Sarah."